My first talk to you was about children. I want to focus on teenagers this time, and the verse I'm going to be reading is from Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish but fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever then annuls the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. I grew up in a church in Idaho, in the mountains of Idaho, hunting and fishing, and that was my life as a young person. I grew up in a church, very active in a church as a church goes, but by the time I was a teenager, I had no idea about what Christianity was really about. I did not know, I didn't read the Bible, I wasn't interested in the things of the Bible necessarily, and I didn't think like a Christian, but I did think like a church person. And my coming to Christ was a real eye-opener. I ended up being in Chicago at what probably now is called community organizer meeting to protest the Vietnam War. This is 1970, Christmas. And I realized at that time that I was not a Christian. And I'm not going to go into that in depth or in detail, but in this next year, it was my senior year in high school, I gave my heart to the Lord. I opened my Bible for the first time and to read it that was outside of church, and I began to seek the Lord. And what led eventually to my stepping kind of outside of the church and getting involved in the Jesus People movement in 1971, being involved in a vast lifestyle change. I went from seeing church as something I did once a week for an hour or two, and youth group as basically a fun time I did on Wednesday night, to a full-out lifestyle change. And the Jesus People movement involved Bible study and prayer and worship and evangelism all the time. If we were not working, we were either doing evangelism or we were studying or praying. And I realized, and this went on for several years until I got involved in college, and while I never quit, I continued to do that up through my college and seminary days. And then when I went into ministry in the 80s, the pastoral ministry, I began to take this concept of a lifestyle change, discipleship through a lifestyle change into my local parish. I realized that if I was going to be successful with teenagers, I had to approach it as the Jesus People did and not as I was trained, as I was brought up in my local church. I knew that the local church thing, the Sunday school and the youth group thing did not meet me. It did not reach me. Now, I'm not saying it had no effect on me, but it did not reach me with the gospel. It was leaving the church and getting involved in the Jesus People movement that really transformed my life. And so when I went back in and became a pastor, I approached the church and youth ministry through the Jesus People movement. And I realized if I'm going to impact young people, I have to make it a lifestyle change. How are we successful in training youth today? Well, certainly not with the method that has become the traditional American church model. The American church model doesn't work, and no matter what you do to it, it will not work. Just simply because it's the wrong tool for the job. Okay? It is not a lifestyle changing thing. It is a kind of like an extracurricular activity. We belong to a church, we go to youth group, we go to Sunday school, or we don't, maybe. young people are reflecting the culture and training of the secularization of young people through secular schools and through media and through the internet and other things. That's the way they think. I was just watching some young InterVarsity students do evangelism this week on a boardwalk in New Jersey, and just listening to the questions. Young people can't even answer they ask them questions, and the young people can't even answer the questions. I didn't see anybody even knew what one of the 10 Commandments was. In the whole, several hours I watched them interview young people on the boardwalk there. Today's young people in secular schools, I don't care, even if you go to a church, I've done this many times, go to a church and ask the young people if they can name one of the 10 Commandments, and they can't. They can't, do not have basic Bible literacy. And I'm talking church kids. They do not understand basic Bible literacy. And so the question that I'm coming to, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. If you've lost that saltiness, if you no longer can attract the world, maybe you need to look at what we're doing. If a business had a 90% failure rate, that man would be sitting down with his managers, that CEO would be sitting down with his people saying, we have to change some things here. We have to change something. Now, I live in Idaho, and Idaho is one of the states that is not considered a Mormon mission field, okay? Because we are so heavily Mormon that we are not a mission field. Now, the Mormon Church does not have the same fallout rate as the Protestant churches do. The reason is they approach this whole thing of discipleship in a completely different way. For one, every young person grows up, he's born and he's raised and is expected to be a missionary and to share his faith. And to do that, they have a training program that's elaborate and detailed. And it includes, during junior high and high school, an hour of training every single day of the week, besides what they do in their ward meetings. And so their training program, first of all, it has the expectation of missions or evangelism. And this is a point I want to make right off the bat. If we turn our expectation for discipling young people at just getting them in the church or getting them into heaven, if that's our expectation, we will miss that target more than we'll hit it. But if your expectation is that you're bringing people into ministry, you're bringing them into doing something, as they said in the Second Great Awakening, they became useful. They gave their heart to Christ and they became useful in the church. And we have so individualized youth ministry that youth ministry is more pagan than it is Christian. It's more like how I feel about myself rather than how can I connect, how can I be involved. So the first thing we see is that if we're going to disciple, Jesus didn't disciple people to salvation. He discipled them to ministry. He called them to ministry. He said, I will make you, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. He didn't say, follow me and you're going to go to heaven, or you're going to join the church. He said, follow me and you'll be fishers of men. So the first thing to becoming salty and becoming light of the world is that we have to expect that is our goal. That our goal to being following Jesus is to be a light, is to minister. As he's pointing out here, do not think I came to abolish the law of the prophets, but I came to fulfill. And the one who knows the least of these commandments teaches others to do the same. He shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Now I'm going to say this. It's very difficult for some people to understand. The key to discipleship is the Torah. It's the Torah. It's the law. Okay? It is understanding how the law functions in our... Galatians, Paul says in Galatians, the law is our tutor to bring us to Christ. Now, people say, well, we have Christ, so we don't need the law. Actually, if you're a teenager in modern America, you don't have Christ. And you go to a church, you don't have Christ. So one of the reasons why young people are not coming to Christ is because they don't understand the nature of moral law and God's obligation in His creation covenant with mankind. And they don't come to Christ because they don't have a need to. They don't understand the need to come to Christ because they don't understand the purpose of their creation. And what is the purpose of our creation? It's stated in the Torah, the law. And so Jesus says very clearly here in Matthew that if you want to train people to be great, they have to understand the Torah. Now, I work a lot with refugees, Nepali and Burmese refugees. And when I see them, it reminds me so much of the Jesus People movement. Because when they call someone to become a Christian, they call them to become involved in ministry and to go out and do evangelism. People say, well, there's a great revival happening in the world right now, but it's not happening here. But that's only partly true. That's also partly false. Because when Asians come here, when people from Asia, from Nepal, and from Pakistan, and from Afghanistan, when they come here, they're coming to Christ so fast. When Asians come out of a Buddhist country or a Hindu country, or when they come to Christ and they set foot on this country, the first thing they seek out is to know God, or to at least know something about Him. And so I'm seeing them come to Christ as very quickly, and they get right involved in discipleship, and they go right back out and they share it. A couple of things about youth ministry. I'm just going to kind of summarize this. We have to start by training our own children with the expectation that they will be called to be disciples, to be ministers, to be evangelists, not to go to heaven, but to be useful in the kingdom of heaven. You cannot disciple young people today with the format that is in the current Protestant church. It will not work, okay? And you can't fix it. You have to have a completely different format. The third thing I want to say is that we have to get back to teaching the entire Bible from cover to cover, from creation to Torah to prophets to the gospel and to Revelation. We have to teach the whole thing. And young people need to be literate in that. If you're going to see revival among young people, you have to do that. In fact, if you do that, you will see revival. Not only do you have to, but you will see it.